Borisenko. In early 2020, I was the knitting Democrat who accidentally went viral on the internet for going to a Trump rally and then left the party. I became the conservative darling, was on all the shows, traveled around the country, and then realized that conservatives were no better than Democrats. If there's one thing that I've learned, it's that both political tribes are two sides of the same coin. But it wasn't all bad. On my journey, I became obsessed with understanding the woke ideology and the culture war. I broke the story of the city of Seattle doing segregated training with its employees.
How bad has this stuff become? The city of Seattle has now put out, I'm not kidding you, this is according to Dr. Carolyn Borisenko, who's an organizational psychologist. The city of Seattle asked its white employees to voluntarily spend a day off in a training about their internalized racial superiority.
I broke the story that led to the first ever federal lawsuit against critical race theory in the schools. I broke the Coke Be Less White story, one of the biggest anti-woke stories of all time. It got over 30 million views. Coca-Cola's corporate headquarters even had to change their outgoing voicemail.
Throughout the past few days, you may have seen inaccurate reporting on the content of our recently launched diversity, equity, and inclusion training program.
I exposed the schools in Burlington, Vermont for grooming middle school children live on the internet. They called me an unwoke cult leader for that. And the Vermont Human Rights Commission slandered me publicly as being a hate channel. I even got called a hero in Breitbart for exposing that the Washington Post was writing a hit piece on Christopher Rufo. I have broken story after story after story about what's going on in the public schools, from Cambridge, Massachusetts, to autistic sex education, to the Department of Education in Michigan, literally training teachers all over the state how to groom children. I wrote a book called Actively Unwoke, the ultimate guide for fighting back against the woke insanity in your life. I host a podcast all about fighting back, and I'm downloading all of my knowledge to you on my Substack, carlin.substack.com. The world is a crazy place. We are literally surrounded by cults on all sides. On this show, we're going to do a deep dive into all aspects of the culture war, and I will show you the dark, dystopian underbellies on both sides. Here are the commitments I'll make to you. I will always tell you the truth. I will always bring you receipts. And if you stick with me, I promise you will see the world differently. Welcome to the cult. Please mount that like button for me and subscribe if you feel so inclined. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the official cult stream for the day. Sorry to be a couple minutes late, but as those of you know, we just got finished up a spy stream in which basically I came away believing that we are absolutely headed into a socialist Marxist utopia because the left is just expertly, and I mean expertly, using every single major strategy that the right tries against them to actually gain more power, further indoctrinate their children, and eventually push us to their socialist Marxist utopia that they're all craving. I am 100% completely convinced that that is where we're going. I just keep getting proven right and right and right. I would love to be wrong, believe me, but just every single piece of evidence that I have put in front of me demonstrates that we are headed on the long, slow descent into socialism, no matter how much good people try, because unfortunately, astroturfed organizations like Moms for Liberty will always hijack everything that good people are trying to do to implement the worst possible strategy that they can implement. So today, what we're going to do is let's just get a little preview into what happens when we land in socialist utopia. Now, people like Chris Rufo, hang on, there he is. People like Chris Rufo, and Chris Rufo is like incomparable. I have no issue with him at all. Like, I think that he and I don't agree on everything, God knows, but like, he is a smart activist. Chris Rufo knows how to play the long game. He knows how to play strategically. He sees things in a way that I think a lot of conservative activists don't see. So I have no issue with him. And one of the things Chris Rufo's been doing is he is on the board of directors at the new college in Florida. He was one of several conservatives that got placed on the board of directors to try to take the new College of Florida and take it from being a bastion of socialism in the Florida public university system and turn it back into a classically liberal university with a classically liberal education. Dare to dream. Well, they've been doing this for like over a year now. I think they've been on this little project of theirs. Well, I mean, it's not a little project. It's actually a really big project. They fired the university president. They put in a new president. They got rid of the diversity, equity, inclusion office. They got rid of the gender studies programs. The socialists have been reeing and complaining the entire time that this is happening. Like, no, 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 you can't do this. And they're not going down without a fight, because socialists don't go down without a fight ever. And one of the things that they've done is that Chris Rufo tweeted this out yesterday. Gender theorist Judith Butler claims that a world in which men are men and women are women is a repressive, hate-filled fantasy that leads to fascism. Queer theory is a war against reality. So pop quiz before we get into where this clip came from. Let me just read this again. We're not going to watch this clip because we're going to watch the full webinar. But what does this mean, guys, for people who attend Socialism Saturday on a regular basis? Gender theorist Judith Butler claims that a world in which men are men and women are women is a repressive, hate-fueled fantasy that leads to fascism. Queer theory is a war against reality. What is Judith Butler really saying? What is Judith Butler's goal? Does anyone know? If you watch Socialism Saturday regularly, especially this past week, you damn well should know the answer to this question. What is queer theory trying to do? Why are men and women are women is repulsive? Why is that? Why might she be saying that? I can see, there it is. Abolish the family, there it is. This is the one I'm looking for. Prometheus, this is exactly correct. Because the one and only goal of queer theory is to destroy the gender binary. Abolish the gender binary. Get rid of the gender binary. And they're doing that because the gender binary upholds capitalism, which is going to lead to abolish the family. Exactly. But what we're seeing here in this specific case is this is not just any queer theorist. According to my book that I got at the Socialism Conference, hang on, let me make myself big so you can see. According to my book that I got at the Socialism Conference, Queer: A Graphic History, hang on, Judith Butler and Michael Foucault are the proud godparents of queer theory. So we're not just watching anyone today, folks. We are watching one of the godparents of queer theory, according to Queer: A Graphic History. Yes, it is a graphic novel all about queer theory that I got at the Socialism Conference. Thank you, capitalism. So Chris Rufo tweeted this tweet out, and I DM'd him and I was like, Chris, where's the presentation? I have to watch the presentation. You know I have to watch the presentation. And oh, lo and behold, this is not just like simply a presentation. This is a whole initiative by the faculty at New College who are pissed off that their school isn't going to be a bastion for socialism anymore. And they have started a new initiative called Alt New College, an online institute for academic freedom. Alt New College is launching courses and lectures to support the academic freedom of New College, Florida students following an unprecedented hostile takeover of New College of Florida, with over 1/3 of faculty having left. We've started to bring in faculty to keep teaching students in areas under siege, free of political interference. The founding spirit of New College will move on. Or live on, rather. So you can see, guys, socialists don't actually give up. They're not like conservatives where they take their toys and go home every single time they're told no. Socialists don't give up. If socialists are told no, they find another way. And in this case, it looks like the faculty at New College, Florida, have created an entire different online institution in which they're partnering with major organizations to fund this little endeavor. And we can look more into their funding another day, but they have just launched their YouTube channel, which only has 19 subscribers. And a week ago, they added their first lecture to their YouTube channel, An Authoritarian Assault on Gender Studies, with Masha Gessen, Judith Butler, and Libby Harity. The first lecture for Alt New College is a conversation with Massa, Judith Butler, introduced by former New College of Florida student Libby, who was forced to transfer to Hampshire College. Why is Hampshire College significant? Does anyone know what I did at Hampshire College back in April? Hampshire College is an extremely woke college in Massachusetts. They have a giant mural denouncing whiteness in the middle of campus. I know because I took pictures of it. I was there. What did I do at Hampshire College back in April? Does anyone remember? This is like really going into the archives. It's not even that long ago, but it feels like 3 years ago. Yes, I went to not tree reproductive justice, I went to the Socialist Reproductive Justice Conference at Hampshire College. Yes, this is the conference where I went on the self-managed abortion tour. This is the conference where the former president of Hampshire College in the morning keynote denounced capitalism from the main stage. This was one of the most uber woke experiences of my life. It was my first jaunt into real life socialism, and that was at Hampshire College, where now Libby has transferred to. Too bad, so sad, Libby. Alt New College offers free courses and lectures in subject areas under siege to support the academic freedom of students following the hostile takeover of New College of Florida and public education in Florida by the evil fascist Ron DeSantis. Okay, it doesn't say evil fascist. I embellished there, but you can get the basic mise-en scène. Guys, we are going to be watching this lecture today, and we are going to be picking it apart, and we are going to analyze it for all of its queer theory, Judith Butler, Michael Foucault goodness, and we're going to talk about what this means. Keep in mind that this is basically a Socialism Saturday. This is like between Happy Hour and Socialism Saturday. This isn't like real socialism, but this is socialism. Everyone we're going to hear from today is going to be speaking socialist, okay? So we need to apply all of our Socialism Saturday learnings to identifying socialists in the real world, in the wild, when they show up right in front of us. And so we're going to watch this lecture, The Authoritarian Assault on Gender Studies. Dun, dun, dun. Go grab a drink, grab a snack. We're going to get into it in just a minute. But before we get started, I want to let everyone know that this is not my second stream of the day. This is my second stream of the day. This is just because this is my second stream of the day doesn't mean this is my last stream of the day. I will be going live at 9:30 tonight with Joshua for our regular show, Nothing Remotely Controversial. If you've never been to an episode of Nothing Remotely Controversial with Joshua, it's a fun time. This is a lighthearted look at the news. We have a ton of fun with it. It is news and psychic. So if you are one of those people that's like, don't use tarot cards, they're tools of the devil, don't come to this show, because we do use tarot cards. We do use astrology. Joshua is a professional psychic, has been a professional psychic for a really long time. And we use his amazing psychic abilities to predict what's going to happen in this crazy world around us. That's going to be at 9:30 tonight. And then tomorrow, in addition to the normal 5 p.m. stream tomorrow, which I don't know what we're streaming yet, but I'm going to find something good. In addition to that, we are also doing the second GOP clown car debate reaction stream tomorrow. And I think I'm starting the stream like 8:30. I think the debate starts at 9 o'clock. Joshua will also be joining me for this. He's very excited. He's going to come with astrology charts for all of the debate participants to predict who's going to have a good night, who's going to have a bad night. We're going to have a lot of fun with that. That's going to be tomorrow evening. And then on Thursday, we're going to do another supporter-only spy stream. Because last week on Friday, we, of course, infiltrated the Urban Librarians Conference, where I caught our favorite Marxist librarian, Emily Drabinski, saying flat out that she doesn't think the librarians can be politically neutral. That was a supporter-only all-day spy stream, and it went so well, and it was so much easier for me to execute, that I decided to do another supporter-exclusive live stream, and we're going to be doing that on Thursday. Now, I'm not going to tell you what it is, although it does have to do with trans kids, evil right-wing fascist something, but I will tell you that it's going to start round about 4:30, 5 o'clock, and it's going to end round about 9:30. And if you want to participate in the supporter-only live stream, what you need to do is make sure you are supporting my work on one of many sites. Now, the site I would appreciate you supporting it on the most is on Substack, my main Substack, the Actively Unwoke Substack, which is Carlyn, Karlyn.substack.com. And you can become a supporter over there for $8 a month or $80 a year, which of course keeps me in business. I can't do this without you guys. You can also become a supporter in my locals community. You can also become a supporter in my Patreon. You can also become a YouTube channel member, or you can become a Twitter subscriber. And all of those will get you access to the supporter only live stream that we are going to be doing on Thursday. Kyle wants to know, when will the Friday stream go public? I'm not sure I want to risk the copyright strike, Kyle. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to make it fully public. If I'm honest about it, I thought I was going to, but I don't want to risk the copyright strike for that. So I need to think about that. I will be releasing important information from that stream, but of course, the full stream is still available for the full stream is still available for supporters. So if you want to access the full stream, then you're more than welcome to become a supporter on whichever platform works best for you. And you can access that stream. Isn't that nice? So I've also got some other stuff going on in the Substack, guys. I did just launch this new category on the Substack. I'm calling it the Video Vault. And so this is going to be a place, if you see in the top menu right here, it only has one video right now, but this is where I'm going to be adding just video clips from Socialism Saturdays, video clips from streams, explaining different aspects of the woke ideology, breaking it down in plain English. So this is something that people have been asking. They're like, Carlin, why don't you make clips for things to break them down? Well, I have been the entire time. You can find them on my YouTube channel, but it's also like mixed in with a lot of stuff. And I know it's not always the most convenient format. So I'm creating a dedicated video vault on Actively Unwoke. You go in, and this isn't even hosted on YouTube. This is all video that's on the Substack exclusively. So in case anything ever happens to this YouTube channel, all of our best socialism clips are going to live in one place on the Substack, and so you can find that there. I have got a whole bunch of videos to add to that, so you're going to see a lot more content there very soon. I cut a bunch of them last night, and so that will be going up. I just want everyone to know that that is where you can access video clips for the foreseeable future. Yay. Let's see. Anything else? Nope, that's it. Let's get this party started. Guys, please do go ahead and mount that like button for me. Mounting the like button lets YouTube know to recommend this stream to other people so they can come and join us. And we are watching the alternative New College, the socialists in New College, their alternative college model, the authoritarian assault on gender studies. Let's get this party started.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the inaugural lecture of Alt New College. My name is Libby Harity. Many of you zooming in from New College of Florida will recognize my face as the former Senate president and leader of the student protest movement out there at New College of Florida. I'm currently zooming into you from Smith College, which is not where I go to school now. I go to Hampshire, but I had a class here today. So that's where they've got me hanging out for this Zoom call. So thank you all for coming. Again, this is the first of a series of lectures that's going to be offered by this program that's going to be called Alt New College. So this is an initiative by New College alumni and supporters trying to make sure that we can offer academic freedom and various other forms of support to members of the faculty and the student body who have been affected by the takeover at New College. So the second one, so this is the first one, second one is going to be at 12:15 tomorrow. That's going to be on National Voter Registration Day. It's going to be called Young People Can Change America, Youth Voting and Political Power.
We're going to have to get access to like these live shows. If they're streaming these live somewhere, I want access to it. So we're going to have to infiltrate this and spy stream everything.
It's going to be featuring David Hogg. It's going to be the founder of Leaders We Deserve. It's going to also be featuring Brianna Sia, who's the executive director of a nonprofit called Gen Vote, and then Evan Malbrough, who's the director of the Andrew Goodman Foundation. So these are all going to be individuals who have significant pull in the world of voter registration and the registration of young voters. And we're going to have more talks featuring people like Neil Gaiman, who we have connections to, which is crazy. Maya Wiley, who you may have already seen if you were present at Alt graduation last year, and Naomi Oreskes. But
wait, they had their own graduation?
Because we've got Judith Butler and Masha Gessen, my friends. So Professor Butler, as many of you, my fellow queer people, probably know, is a philosopher, distinguished professor in the graduate school at the University of California, Berkeley. Various
course she is.
contributions, including but not limited to gender trouble, identities and bodies that matter. But most importantly, right now, you guys should worry about Judith Butler's new book coming out. It's called Who's Afraid of Gender? It's going to be published early 2024 by Farrar, Straus, and Giroux. So that is exciting. We're also so lucky to be welcoming Masha Gessen. They are a distinguished professor at Craig Newmark Graduate School of Journalism at the City University of New York. They're also a distinguished visiting writer at Bard College, a staff writer at The New Yorker, and the author of various books, including but not limited to The Rights of Lesbian and Gay Men in the Russian Republic and The Future is History, How Totalitarianism Reclaimed Russia and Surviving Autocracy. So all of that is so cool and exciting. Oh my gosh, we're going to get into why this discussion is so important and what the topic of this talk is, which is the authoritarian attack on gender studies. So I'm so lucky and honored to turn the floor over to Professors Gessen and Butler.
Thank you, Libby. Judith, it's such an honor always to talk to you. And I have to say, I'm going to ask...
I don't mean to be like that guy, because you guys know that I don't care if people are trans. It makes no difference to me at all what adults do with their bodies. But are all three of these people on testosterone? That's an honest question. Because they all look like they're on testosterone. Or not testosterone, excuse me. Well, no, I guess testosterone, yeah. I mean, they all look like they're on testosterone.
I'm going to start with asking you to remember something that is probably not terribly pleasant to remember, but I have to say that every time I hear somebody bring up, and this happens more and more often, obviously, the connection between autocracy and the ideas of gender ideology and attacks on gender studies, I flash to a video I saw about 6 years ago of you and your partner Wendy Brown in an airport in Brazil. Am I right to flash to that? And can you talk about what happened that day?
Yes, well, thank you. I just want to say, first of all, Libby, I have great respect for you and all the students and the faculty who've been fighting the destruction of academic freedom and fighting the right-wing efforts to keep you from studying, knowing, seeing, learning all the rights that you have as a student, and of course the faculty there who have lost tenure or who are being threatened with the loss of tenure because their point of view or their field of study is considered not just unacceptable but dangerous, according to DeSantis and Rufo and the
I love it when they name Rufo by name.
Terrifying group of conservatives who are threatening higher education, setting a terrible model in the US and in the world. And yes, I'm honored to be here with Masha Gessen, always someone from whom I learn. Masha, yes, it was in Sao Paulo, Brazil. I was giving a talk and actually helping to organize a conference on democracy. And there was a large crowd outside of that conference that burnt me in effigy, a kind of terrible, distorted picture of me. And I was held responsible for gender ideology. I didn't really know what that was. I'd kind of heard that there was a right.
Judith, you don't know what that is, Judith? Because I literally have a book, A Graphic History of Queer, in which, hang on, let me see if I can find it again. Hang on. I have you as the godparent of queer theory with Foucault in queer-agraphic history. You're telling me you don't know what gender ideology is? Please. Please.
Right-wing fantasy that gender was a totalitarian movement, and I didn't take it too seriously before that moment, but I saw as the security people surrounded me and I was forbidden from walking out in the street by myself, that it was a pretty serious, angry, potentially an actually violent crowd. Luckily, there was a counter protest at the same time, and those were the people who were saying that gender, sexuality are issues that we all need to think about. They are forms of freedom. They are being rethought in ways that are more humane and more complex and should be affirmed. So I met wonderful people there, and I did encounter some pretty ferocious and terrifying ones. In the airport, Wendy Brown and I were attacked, and a woman came at me with a trolley, big metal trolley, calling me a pedophile. And it was like, oh, pedophile, why would I be a pedophile? That seemed really quite absurd. Luckily for me, a young man in a backpack, whose name I do not know, intervened and stopped her and actually got on the floor fighting with her as I took the escalator to the security area. It was a terrifying experience, and it did lead me to ask, what is this anti-gender ideology movement? Who are these people? What do they want? What do they fear? How are they organized? And
she assumes they're
this
organized.
is a good question, because at that time, it was something that I encountered in Latin America. I encountered it in Europe, in Eastern Europe and Central Europe as well. And it has more recently come to the US through the Evangelical Church, the World Congress of the Family. And
Hang on. People in the chat are saying that they don't believe that she was attacked. I believe it. I absolutely believe that that is something that a conservative would be stupid enough to do. I 100% believe it, because in the last 3 years, I have been attacked far worse by the conservative right than I ever have been by the left. So I actually do believe this.
Wing Catholicism mainly, and it has found its way into the attack on gender studies at New College and in several other colleges and universities throughout the US and Canada. But I asked myself, why was I being accused of pedophilia again? It seemed to me that there were people who thought that if you followed some doctrine of gender, and I wasn't even sure what they meant by that, you were not constrained by the taboo against homosexuality. You could break that taboo. You were free to break that taboo. And that meant that you would break every other taboo, right? Incest, sex with animals, sex with children, etc. So there was a kind of somewhat wild ideation about what gender studies was, or what the word gender actually meant. But I also saw that these were people who were terrified that their idea of the natural and the normal family, heterosexual, patriarchal, exclusively heterosexual, patriarchal, was being deeply destabilized by something.
Judith Butler, and it's not even close. I would significantly rather be locked in a room with Judith Butler than Matt Walsh. Not even close. Not even in the same league.
Thing called gender. They hadn't actually read any gender studies, and they didn't bother to.
Judith Butler ain't gonna do shit to me in a room. Judith Butler is gonna sit there and probably shake from fear if she was in a room with me. Matt Walsh would be a certifiable fucking nightmare.
know what the field is about or how gender operates in public policy. They didn't study the issue. They accepted a kind of phantasm of what gender is and how destructive it could be from church authorities and other kinds of right-wing institutions. And as a result, it led them into a certain kind of frenzy, bolstered by the Bolsonaro regime at the time.
So I know you have a new book with a title that sounds like it has directly to do with what we were just talking about, but the advanced reader's copy is still on its way to my mailbox. So all I can ask is, am I making the right assumption?
I guess in this book forthcoming, Who's Afraid of Gender, I am trying to figure out what is it that's being feared. You know, we used to debate in gender studies and women's studies, queer studies, okay, what's your theory of gender? Is it intersectional? Is it psychoanalytic? Is it Marxist? What do you think about?
All of those three things are the same. Is it intersectional? Is it psychoanalytic? Or is it Marxist? Why are all three of those the same? Does anyone know? Pop quiz. Judith Butler just said, like, well, we're debating gender theory. Is it intersectional? Is it psychoanalytic? Is it Marxist? All three of those ideas are the same. Why? Does anyone know? Do 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 do. This is on the right track. Do 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 do. Because they're social. Not really. All of those ideas stem from the Frankfurt School. Critical theory stems from the Frankfurt School, which is where intersectionality comes from. Freud was a member of the Frankfurt School, and of course Marx was in the, well, I mean, like Hegel and like all that stuff. Like Marx deeply integrated in like the Frankfurt School stuff. So every single one of those things comes from the Frankfurt School, essentially.
Psychologies of gender, how does gender get formed? We asked all kinds of questions, and we still do. But the attack on something called gender ideology isn't about an open debate. It's actually an effort to close down debate. They don't want us reading or writing about this topic. It's a way of trying to stop reading and stop writing and stop open discussion. Now they call
Well, that's just intellectually dishonest, Judith. I don't give a flying fig if you read, write, lecture on this topic. I just don't want you being funded by my taxes in order to do it.
us totalitarians. They say we're ideological as if we belong to some kind of cult, or we have a single doctrine that we believe in and that we impose. But that idea of us as totalitarian is actually, well, it's not just false, it's truly false. I mean, every women's studies class I've ever been in is full of debate, conflict, differences of point of view, different methodologies, right? They're trying to work it all out is not easy at all. But by telling us that we are indoctrinating or that we have a single doctrine, they're actually trying to shut down thought.
No one says that these people have a single doctrine. Literally, no one is saying that.
They want to shut down open inquiry. And the shutting down of open inquiry is the destruction of academic freedom and the idea of the university itself. So, you know, it turns out that one tactic of their form of censorship is to ascribe totalitarianism to a field of study that, in fact, is very open-ended. And my sense is they are frightened of the questions we pose. They're frightened of the different frameworks we offer. They're frightened that we're producing too many possibilities in this world, too many forms of freedom, and they want to shut.
I actually think this is fascinating because Judith Butler is like creating this whole universe in her head that is not actually grounded into like reality at all. They're so afraid that we're asking questions. They're so afraid of where all this might go. They're afraid of us reading. They're afraid of us writing. They're afraid of us doing this and that and the other thing. Judith, no one is afraid of whatever it is that you might do. What we don't want is for your ideas to be taught, funded by our taxes in public schools to 6-year-olds.
That down. They're not real. They don't really believe we have a single doctrine that we impose on other people. They don't want our open questions. They want our open-ended inquiry. So I don't know. Where
They're just
is
afraid of
power in the
questions.
scene? Well, the power of
Why are
censorship
they
is
so
most
afraid of
definitely on their
questions?
side.
Why?
But obviously they feel that the power is not with them. I mean, this is something that's very familiar to me from Russia, which has assumed this sort of victim position in relationship to the world, right? And where this idea of gender ideology is really central to creating this victim position, and to saying, you know, that the West is trying to force its ideas on us, is trying to force our families to live in ways that they're not accustomed to, is trying to basically dislocate every single one of us and every single family. And I guess that's where the fear is, right? When you study fear, do you find yourself, do you find any reserves of empathy for people who are experiencing that kind of fear?
Well, you know, oddly, and the more I read in these materials, right, the anti-gender movement, the anti-gender ideology movement, the more I saw that it was driven by a fear of destruction. And we certainly see that in the Russian discourse and Putin's discourse, right? If Ukraine becomes part of the EU, that will bring in the gender imperative, the new gender policies. It will enfranchise homosexuals, whatever he calls them. You know, there's this fear that there's going to be this flood of gay, lesbian, feminist agendas, and it will destroy the spiritual core of Russia itself. If I understand correctly, at least his 2015 doctrine is the one that I read most recently. But that's an, you know, why would that be a flood? All it is some laws that protect people from discrimination. And yet, in places like Hungary, you know, the argument is made, no, we don't want our market contracts with the EU to include clauses that pledge us to non-discrimination, because we want to be free to discriminate, because the freedom to discriminate against gay, lesbian, and trans people is important to our national identity. And it turns out that the other thing that's really important to their national identity is keeping migrants out. Right. So like, what is this national identity, which is made of like normative, heteronormative families that all have this very specific idea of nationality and race and religion? I mean, these are efforts to resist a changing world and a complex demographic composition of our world, and to resist open borders and living in freedom with others who are perhaps living differently. I do think the fear of destruction is there, but I also think the fear of destruction is misnamed. Yes, a lot of people are losing their sense of job security. Yes, there's climate disaster. Yes, many aspects of forced migration in particular are destabilizing. Yet, why is it that we think that what's destroying the world is something called gender or critical race theory, or poor migrants at the border? These are not forces of destruction. These are people and who are vulnerable and who are subject to state violence at accelerating rates. And yet they are nefariously cast as the forces of destruction itself.
I will say this. I think that the right harps way too much on immigration, on all the border stuff. Like, there are no other political groups that care about the border stuff nearly as much as the right does. Everything is about the border. Everything is about illegal immigration. Everything's about migrants and like reading about that. And there may be like legitimate arguments that are being made, but how it comes across to me, and I'm not on the left. I'm actually more right wing than most people on the right. But how it all comes across to me is effectively, we don't like brown people. That's how it comes across. It is constant. It is never ending, to the detriment of every other issue except abortion, and no one else cares. There is not any other political group that cares about what is going on at the border. No other group cares. And so you are winning exactly 0 votes with constantly reading about the border. You are, in fact, driving people away because it tends to look really effing racist. I don't know what the right thinks that they're winning with this. I really and truly don't.
So I think this is like one of those dinner parties where you're supposed to turn around on cue and start speaking to the person on the other side of you.
I'm so happy.
So I
to
think
do
this is
that.
what's going to happen.
Great. I'm so happy to do that. Masha, I know that you've written on autocracy, and that in your work on Hannah Arendt, you've written on totalitarianism. And I'm just wondering, there's certain regimes that really focus on the personality of one person, like where powers.
How are migrants destabilizing things? I don't agree. Migrants have always come to the United States to do jobs that no one else wants to do. So how is it destabilizing things? How? If it's always happened. Bro, you must be new here. Shut the fuck up. I am in no mood today for this bullshit. Yeah, this means nothing to me. I'm not gonna go look that up. You want to know why? Because I don't care. It is so far off my radar of things I care about. It is not even funny. All right, no answer on the destabilization. Got it. Thank you.
Really held by one person or a cadre of people around that one person, and we think of those as autocratic regimes. It seems to me that right now we're dealing with forms of authoritarianism, meaning intensified state control in lots of different areas, like control over education, what can be taught, what can be read, control over healthcare. Are trans kids or gender non-conforming kids, do they have access to healthcare? Control at the border, like really hideous border conditions for so many people seeking the right to petition for citizenship.
I promise you that if I went into downtown Dallas right now, there would be literally no one there. And I say that because quite literally every single time I have been in downtown Dallas, not to mention downtown Fort Worth, there is literally no one there. So I don't buy that argument. New York City was already a shithole anyway. There wasn't really you're going to tell me that it's the immigrants that killed New York? Because no, it wasn't. It was far left leadership for years. So these arguments just don't fly. I am sorry. Go get me pictures of downtown Dallas right now. There's no one there. I promise you. Well, then we probably shouldn't be bringing up Dallas as an example of being overrun by immigrants, because quite literally every single time I have been to Dallas, ain't no one been there. Literally no one. The streets are empty. Nothing's going on. And I have been there multiple times. The same thing with Fort Worth, which is right next to Dallas. So don't tell me that immigrants are overrunning Dallas when there's no one effing there. Well, sadly, you've given me no evidence to prove me wrong, so here we are. And I'm the one with a microphone, so it's the way it goes.
Citizenship. Is it focused in a personality? Can we say DeSantis is the problem, or Trump? Or do we have a more diffuse kind of authoritarianism going on?
All right. This is the last thing I'm going to say about this. You are the one denying the fact that if I go into downtown Dallas right now and take a picture, there will be no one there. If I go into downtown Fort Worth right now, which is right next to Dallas, there will be no one there. It is the same thing every single time I have ever been to that area. There is no one there. It is not being overrun with immigrants. If you think it is being overrun with immigrants, then you go take a camera and show me a picture in downtown Dallas that is being overrun with immigrants. But until you do that, you haven't proven me wrong for shit. And this is the last I'm going to say on it.
Oh, that's such an interesting idea. I haven't thought about it that way, but
all right, go Short's getting a timeout. Thank you.
But I think maybe I can come at it from
no
a somewhat
today,
different
guys.
angle, which is that
no mood.
I think a lot of the time those personalities that end up at the center.
I am in no mood to argue with conservatives over their bullshit today. I have family in Dallas. It's not overrun with immigrants. Oh, golly gee, look at that. Jesus Christ. If there is any more talk about immigration, then I'm going to start banning the people who are talking about it, because I would actually like to listen to this. I know I brought it up, but it's my stream. I can do what I want. I'm now tired of the topic. We're moving on.
Center of an autocracy
Your feelings do not matter to me today at all.
Arbitrary. Right? And Putin is certainly one such person. It is as though he were drafted to fill a space that was already there. There was such a hunger for absolutism, for the kind of resentment-driven politics that he could give voice to, and that he could embody. But he could have been anyone else. I mean, I think that Russia got particularly unlucky with this arbitrarily chosen person. But I think that with almost anyone who ended up in that space, it we would have had some version of Putinism. And I think maybe that's what we're observing in this country as well, is that we got particularly unlucky with Trump. I think Trump is unlike anyone who had ever, certainly in my lifetime, been in the political scene in this country, and who is currently in it. But then we see so many different mini Trumps that are temperamentally and even perhaps ideologically, right, and or politically in the way in which they come at politics, are very different from Trump, but that seem to carry out so many of the same things. And that doesn't even begin to explain what we're observing at the border, because of course, technically, nominally, it's the Democratic administration, it's the Biden administration that's creating policy at the border, and yet it's almost seamlessly connected to Trump's politics, which were frankly not that disconnected from Obama's politics at the border, right? So maybe a way to think about them, it's a really disheartening way, but it's probably accurate, is to think about the kind of fears that you were talking about, the fear of destruction that's demanding these kinds of policies that are perhaps presented differently by different administrations, but in substance are the same, and reflect the same fears and demands, and of course the same lack of defenders for people who are coming to this country seeking international protection. and have no one to speak up for them.
Yeah. And are we seeing also perhaps a kind of retrenchment of masculinity of a certain kind? I mean, it seems to me like, in a way,
Jamie Julian, I don't know what I did to deserve this super chat because I'm clearly not in a good mood today, but I do appreciate it. Thank you.
one could say, well, DeSantis is like Trump or a different Trump, but
DeSantis is nothing like Trump.
That DeSantis's willingness to, well, destroy academic freedom, destroy academic institutions, attack lesbian and gay and trans people, attack racial minorities, or teaching the history of slavery in this country.
Well, thank you.
That there's something about this shameless hatred that belongs to a certain idea of masculinity that knows no bounds, that has no restriction, that does what it wants, that hates as it wishes.
Again, I have to say, it really doesn't. I'm not a big DeSantis fan, as you guys know, but like, it really does seem like Judith Butler is just making up a whole bunch of shit that actually has no basis in reality at all. We can all agree. Well, I don't know if everyone would agree with this, but I would certainly agree with this Rottweiler. Ron DeSantis is an authoritarian prick. He's an authoritarian statist prick. And I'm not voting for him for president. I don't want to vote for him for anything. But I don't think that Ron DeSantis has destroyed academic freedom in Florida. I don't think he's running around attacking gay and trans people in Florida. I just don't think that that's real.
And that is weirdly admired by people who feel relatively powerless in their lives. Like, oh, look at what this guy's willing to say. Look at what this guy's willing to do. Is there some retrenchment of masculinity going on in these figures, and are they different from one another?
I think that's probably an absolute.
Let me see. I got a question coming in. Would masculinity be another euphemism for capitalist beneficiary of capitalism? I don't think so, because listen, remember, these people don't want gender to exist at all. They don't want masculinity to exist. They also don't want femininity to exist. What is different about how these people attack gender is that they attack men and women in different ways, using different tactics, and they never combine the two because they really don't want you to understand that their ultimate goal is to abolish the gender binary. So they can't attack men and women at the same time, because that would kind of like give away the ball game of what they're doing. They attack men over here, they attack women over here. They're attacking both genders. When they attack men get all teed up. They're like, taxing their masculinity. This is where you get this like MGTOW bullshit that's going on the right. When they attack women, the TERFs get all teed up. They're like, feminism. And this is where you get that like, you know, feminist, like TERF, like crazy radical feminist person on the like well, I won't say they're on the left because they're kind of, some are on the left, some are on the right, but both of those groups are annoying as shit. MGTOW is annoying and radical feminists are annoying, but those groups exist because the left is attacking men from this direction and attacking women from this direction. Never the two shall meet, because the goal is to abolish the gender binary, and if they attacked both at the same time, then that would kind of give away the point. But I don't think it's a euphemism for capitalism. I could be mistaken about that. I'm open to being convinced about that. I just haven't seen that yet. William, thank you for the super sticker. I do appreciate it. Let me see. And for people who are pissed off that she's like, masculinity, remember, they're not only attacking men, guys. I don't want to hear anything about men being the poor victims of the world today. What they do believe, I mean, I suppose there is something to be said, Rottweiler, like they do believe that the gender binary was created by capitalism because capitalism created gender roles. So that could be it.
accurate description. It's again not quite the way I'm used to thinking about it. I mean, everything you've just said sounds completely accurate. There's this appeal in this kind of politics to being your worst self, right? And it's I mean, I really think that
I agree with that, actually.
the Trumpian invitation is to that, right? Let's and I think of that as fascist politics. That's definitely
That's capitalism.
That
For those who don't know, fascism means capitalism. I have these people on videos, not these two specifically, but many socialists on video saying that fascism equals capitalism, fascism is free market capitalism, stuff like that. But where I will actually agree is that I absolutely do believe that conservative politics is all about showing your worst self. Maybe not everyone, but a lot of people on the right, I kind of, and I think Trump does it as well. I don't think Trump ever brings his best self to Twitter or anywhere that he's posting on the internet. So that's actually a fair and valid point so far as I'm concerned.
That sort of we know from the history of Nazi Germany how important this idea of throwing off the pretense, the hypocrisy of civilized politics was, and how this sort of this invitation to perform aggression, to perform hatred.
Oh, Bill is asking an excellent question, and Bill, this is very observant of you. Is this the bubble part? Neither of them push back on anything they say. Hard to believe they both agree with everything they say. Okay, what is the word that begins with A that is what you are supposed to do when a child comes to you and says, "I'm trans"? What do these people tell you to do? This might be a little bit of an abstract question, and I'm okay with that, but, like, I wanna see if people get the answer right. When a child, according to these people, when a child, affirm! Exactly. Affirm. Affirm. That's what these people say you do. You affirm, you affirm, you affirm, you affirm, you affirm. Well, affirmation isn't just about trans kids. They affirm each other on everything. You like it is uncanny. Like when I was at the socialism conference, no one ever questioned, no one ever pushed back, no one ever challenged ideas. It was all about affirmation. And then if someone had a different idea, it was fine for a person to have like a different idea, but they were not critical of the previous idea. They are never critical of each other's ideas in any sort of like real tangible way. They say like, "Oh, it's really great that you have ideas. Here is my ideas." But they don't say your ideas are wrong and mine are right. They affirm the ideas and then they go, "Yeah, and what about this too? And what about this too? And what about this too? And what about this too?" It is really an eerie socialist thing. Yep, affirm a person's truth because you don't know their lived experience. Exactly. Eventually, they would fight about their ideas once they get power. "Oh, Prometheus, you're new." They already have power. They have more power than they know what to do with. No, they're not gonna do it once they gain power. They're gonna keep doing the same thing. Nope, that's not what toxic positivity is. Disagree.
To engage in your worst impulses, to be real in your badness, was so incredibly powerful. And I think that's sort of I mean that's how I think of it. I think we can certainly accurately say that it's also a retrenchment of a certain kind of masculinity. It's also, of course, fascinating that the list that you went through, right, the attacks on academic institutions, the attacks on migrants, the attacks on LGBT people, they almost seem like they come from the same playbook, as though there were a checklist that they were going down, which I don't think is the case.
No, it is the case.
I think a lot of it is instinctive. I mean, I think a lot of it comes from, of
No.
course, observing one another and being inspired. But there's an almost intuitive set of others who are opposed, who are seen as naturally in opposition to this kind of politics. And so without having to have a playbook, without having to have a checklist, all these political leaders basically engage in the same things.
I'm wondering whether the term fascism is appropriate to describe some of what we're seeing, given the fact that these governments in the US and elsewhere are actually involved in rights stripping activities, taking away rights that have been established and establishing groups of people as unworthy of having rights. I worry about that. I worry about the passions of hatred that, well, we could say these politicians are stoking those passions, but
they're not using the big scholastic words to sound cultured. This is how they actually talk. This is how they communicate. This is why I say that the number one thing that people need to do right now is learn how to speak socialist, because once you learn how to speak socialist, this doesn't sound like gobbledygook anymore. You can understand what they're saying. This is actually the language they speak. They speak it to each other in private. They're not just doing it to show off. They're not doing it to sound highfalutin. This is the culture that has been perpetuated by academia specifically, because this is a very specific type of like academic language. So learn how to speak socialist. It'll become a whole lot more clear. They don't object to men. They don't object to women. They object to gender entirely. They object to binary gender. They do not want the gender binary to exist. They're allowed to present as whoever they want. When they get rid of the gender binary, they can literally present as whoever and whatever they want, and it makes no difference, because they do not want the binary of men and women to exist.
we also have to say, look, something's happening among the people where these hatreds are also there. They're already there. They're there to be stoked. They're there to be inflamed. And I think that's part of what we need to see is that it's not just coming from these figures, but these figures know how to pull on those passions and inflame them. And, my own sense is that we're seeing fascist passions stoked in the service of increasingly authoritarian regimes.
Guys, I don't know how to say this any differently to you. They already have power. They already have it. They completed their long march through the institutions. They have it. They do not operate in the same way that you guys... The left does not operate how the right perceives that the left operates. The left makes slow, small moves over time. They have quiet conversations. There's no authoritarian gong that goes off and all of a sudden, like, everyone is like fighting. They don't fight. Like we said before, they affirm. Everything is about affirmation. They are always affirming. They work through their differences in other ways. So they already have power. If they were going to do this, they would have already done it, because they have complete control of the institutions. William says, I'm fairly new to the live stream, so I'm learning. Hey, man, nothing wrong with being a beginner, William. I'm trying to teach you as best I can. I'll definitely read up on your books and see if I can understand them. William, you're doing what you need to be doing. Like, if I'm correcting you or I'm putting ideas out there, it's because I want you to learn. I'm not trying to make you feel bad or anything. We were all a beginner once. I was a beginner once at this too. So this is about learning, and so I'm glad you're here. And please feel free to ask any questions. I'm not like trying to pick on anyone, but I am trying to teach people what they have wrong. And the reason you have it wrong, guys, by the way, it's not your fault, because there are a lot of people who teach this information incorrectly, because they teach it based off of a right-wing perception of what the left is doing rather than what the left is actually doing. So if you've got some misperceptions or you don't understand, don't be too hard on yourself, because I understand why that happens. It's because there's just so much misinformation out there, and you don't know what you don't know, okay? But what I'm teaching you, I will always show with receipts so that you can see where it's coming from.
I don't know whether that's true. I have a feeling you would have a better sense than I do.
I've decided to take, because I've thought about this a lot, because I have had to write about this in sort of in real time quite a bit, and I've decided to use a very pragmatic metric to decide whether to use the word fascism. If it's helpful to the conversation, I will use it, and if I think that there is too much of a risk of going down the rabbit hole of arguing, well, but they haven't done this, or they haven't gone quite this far, but you're comparing them to a regime that killed 6 million people. That's just not terribly productive. I think the truth is
It's
that
actually a
we're living
nuanced
in a
take. We
time
have to
when
appreciate the nuanced takes when they come.
meeting some kind of formal definition of fascism has become basically trivial. There are a lot of political situations in this country and in Europe that rise easily, and in Latin America that rise easily to, and in Israel that rise easily to the definition of fascism. So then, what happens if you use it in conversation? Does it actually move the conversation forward? But at the same time, I also think that it's important to not neglect the word fascism, if for no other reason then it will be used by the other side, just as the word totalitarianism has been bizarrely, as you pointed out, claimed by the other side. So I think—
Is anyone actually using the word totalitarian? Who's using the word totalitarian? Who is using the word totalitarian, and did it come from Charlie Kirk and Ben Shapiro? I haven't. The reason I ask is I actually can't think of anyone that I follow that has used the word totalitarian, and I would strongly recommend against that. But they've obviously heard it somewhere, or they're making it up. I mean, we can't dismiss the fact that they might just be making it up.
a kind of rigorous approach to language, and using powerful political terms intentionally and arguing for their use is actually a really important part of the conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, both of you, for those super, super awesome discussion points. Now we're going to move into the point that everybody watching is really excited about, which is the question and answer portion. But I get to ask my questions first, but everybody in the audience, please look down. You'll see a question Q&A button down at the bottom of your screen, if I'm not mistaken. Use that to stick your questions in there, and I will be looking through those, picking some out after my first couple questions. So super generally, professors, very, very basic. Why is gender studies important? Why do we need to keep it in higher education?
I think gender studies is first and foremost a way of thinking about how power is organized in society. We have to ask questions about why is it that there are enormous wage differentials still between men and women.
There aren't.
We have to ask questions about—
That's not real.
Versions of masculinity and femininity that have been passed down over time.
That's the gender binary, what you
that
just
serve
said.
us or that do not serve us. What do they make possible? What do they repress and rule out?
That's a gender binary.
How do we think about gender norms that are taught to children?
Gender binary.
About the distribution
Abolish
of
the
labor,
family.
who's doing housework, who's doing reproductive labor.
That's
who is
abolish the family.
supposed to be monopolizing the public sphere. What do we know about how people identify as genders?
Gender binary.
It's a very complex matter. You got assigned a sex, but does that mean you become the gender that sex assignment seems to imply?
Gender
Or
binary.
maybe not. What do we know about the life stories of people, the different ways in which sex assignment is actually lived? And what do we think about the medical technologies that have established the binary between men and women as the only possible way to think about
Gender binary.
Gender studies involves history, involves sociology, it involves multiple cultural and linguistic contexts.
So every single thing that Judith Butler just said can be drawn back to either the gender binary or the nuclear family. And these concepts are intimately related under socialists, okay? So here's how it works. Here's the good general overview, and I wrote about this on my Substack recently. White supremacy, which means capitalism, created the gender binary because capitalism made made gender roles for men and women, in which men got to go out and earn money by getting into powerful positions in society, and women had to stay home and do the unpaid labor of birthing the future generation of workers and then caring for the future generation of workers. It created this gender binary because it created an unequal power between men and women, because men got to go out into the world and earn money and that sort of thing, and then women were relegated to the home to birth and care for the future workers. This gets into abolishing the nuclear family because the nuclear family, through social reproduction theory, upholds the gender binary, and it also reproduces capitalism because you are literally birthing the next generation of future workers. So every single point that Judith Butler just made has to do with abolishing the gender binary and subsequently abolishing the nuclear family, because they do not believe that they can overthrow capitalism and usher in their Marxist utopia until they abolish the gender binary, which means getting rid of men and women, creating a world full of theys. They will only achieve equity among genders when they get rid of the gender binary entirely, and then abolishing the nuclear family, which is replicating capitalism. Whether or not Judith Butler has children makes no difference. I don't have children. So why do you guys care? Does everyone understand? Does everyone understand? What we're talking about is what these people perceive, to make sure you understand what they actually believe. Because if you do not understand what they actually believe, then you cannot defeat them in any way. Trying to debunk what they believe is a useless effort, because it will never make any difference and never lead to you actually beating them in the long run. Does everyone understand? I'm especially asking the new people. Do you understand why capitalism created the gender binary? The gender binary is upheld in the nuclear family. The nuclear family, through social reproduction theory, also upholds capitalism, and that in order to get rid of capitalism, they need to get rid of both the gender binary and the nuclear family. And that is exactly what Judith Butler just ran through in her lists of what gender studies do. This is extremely oversimplifying it, and it's not helpful. Do all the new people understand what I'm saying? They would argue that the gender binary did not come before capitalism, because before capitalism, there were many genders that people could have, and that trans and non-binary people were usually leaders in communities. I'm going to reference you to my Substack, where I literally have videos of them saying that prior to capitalism, trans and non-binary people existed. There were all sorts of genders that people could adhere to, and trans and non-binary people were usually leaders in their communities. I have them flat out saying this from the Socialism Conference. That is what they believe. Well, that's what they believe. All right. I'm going to assume that everyone understands. We can move on.
effects. It's very hard to make large generalizations without doing very specific work. So there's an empirical basis to gender studies that's absolutely indispensable. There's also a theoretical set of questions that have emerged from gender studies, including what do we mean by woman and man? And are those the only two categories?
Gender binary?
And do they work the same way in every language? And have they changed through time? Certainly, once we open those questions up, the world looks differently. For some, it's very exciting. And as we've noted, for some, it's apparently terrifying.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Professor Butler. That's a great answer to a pretty broad question. So here's another question focused specifically towards Professor Gessen. You're the expert on the whole Russia thing. How does what's going on in Florida and elsewhere in the United States right now remind you of what you might have seen, experienced, studied in Russia and other authoritarian countries? Why does gender studies stick out as something that they feel the need to cling to?
It does remind me a lot, and in a very frightening way, of what has happened in Russia. It's as though some of the same things were happening, but faster. In Russia, we saw attacks on LGBT people, followed by attacks on media, followed by attacks on higher education. And apologies for this. And actually, it unfolded slower in Russia than it is unfolding in Florida. I think that I'll make this very fast, right? I think that in particular, targeting LGBT people in this day and age has a lot to do with signaling to the people of the state, or in the case of Russia, the people of the country, that social change will be reversed. Right, that what they have experienced, what has made them uncomfortable, has made them scared, or what they have now come to believe has made them uncomfortable and scared, can all be made to go away. Right? And LGBT people, as the people who have gained rights most recently, who have been at the center of the most rapid and most profound social change of the last, say, decade and a half, 2 decades, become automatic scapegoats in this situation, right? If you want to go, the message is, if you want to go back to an imaginary past where you didn't have to deal with any of this, where men were men and women were women, and everybody felt safe and secure, then we're going to make that happen for you by making LGBT people go away.
Another fantastic answer, pretty thorough. So I'm now looking down at
That's not what's happening
Q&A
at all,
here,
but okay.
and this is something that's
That was
been
all just
expressed
made
in a
up
couple
nonsense.
of questions, but I'm gonna read this question as asked by our friend at New College, Claire Robinson. How do you work through, parentheses, emotionally, the fear and the backlash or the violence that you can and could face by writing and teaching the theories that you do?
Well, there is for me a somewhat simple answer to that, which is to become part of networks of solidarity and not to try to be a heroic individual. Don't be the one person who stands up to power. You actually need your communities. You need solidarity. It means digital connections. It means close people nearby, but we all need solidarity, and we not only need it for our own psychological survival, especially when we're attacked or mocked or derided or threatened physically, or when people close to us are literally killed or beaten by standing up for certain kinds of rights. And we see this with LGBTQ rights often, unfortunately.
Where?
We need it not just for our psychological survival. We also need it because we have to be building political communities that prefigure the world we want to live in. that show people what world is possible, where you live together, you cohabit with radical differences, and without necessarily being radically threatened.
We're gonna listen to this again. This is what Judith Butler is talking about, is their vision for like what they replace the nuclear biological family with, which is essentially like cohabitation units that are made up like very, very differently than we imagine the family, which is not necessarily a bad and evil thing, right? But nope, Dolly, this is fundamentally incorrect. Trans is not your problem. Queer is your problem. Queer is not the same as trans. Queer is not the same as gay. Queer is a far left political ideology. You do not have to be trans to be queer. You don't need to be anything to be queer. So no, trans is not demolishing the LGB. This is a right-wing talking point that has no basis in reality at all. What is happening is a far left political ideology has tried to hijack a movement and is being helped along expertly by the conservative right, who does not understand what's going on and is not defining things correctly. Trans people uphold the gender binary. If you are going from a man to a woman or a woman to a man, you uphold the gender binary. Queer is seeking to abolish the gender binary. That's why you have so many non-binary people running around. So your argument is not with the T, it's with the Q. All right, let's listen here, because she's going to talk about like what are we replacing, and she might not say this, but like essentially like what are we replacing the nuclear family with?
And we see this with LGBTQ rights often, unfortunately.
Well, you guys are going to have to get over that, because if this is the line that you are going to continue to use because you want to hate on trans people, you are going to lose. The gay hating and the trans hating bullshit from the conservative right is going to lead to all of you losing and these people winning. So you're going to have to get over you're not liking the trans people, because whether or not you like it, if you are transitioning from a man to a woman or a woman to a man, that is still an acknowledgement of the gender binary, and the gender binary is what needs to be upheld at all costs. Every single time you guys do this, you are handing them wins.
This with LGBTQ rights often, unfortunately. We need it not just for our psychological survival. We also need it because we have to be building political communities that prefigure the world we want to live in, that show people what world is possible, where you live together, you cohabit with radical differences, and without necessarily being radically threatened by one another. I mean, for those people who want the return to the ideal world where men are men and women are women, as Masha says, I mean, they may think that their stability and security resides there in the recapturing of such a world.
All right, so since people are not actually listening to what she's saying, we're going to go back and listen again. But Milo says, to be fair, the left is using trans in order to push queer Marxism in schools. No, they're not. You don't understand their language, and therefore you don't understand what they're doing. To queer Marxists, trans does not mean transition. Trans means transform or transcend. So no, they're not pushing people who transition to push queer Marxism in schools. That is a right-wing talking point. That is not a left-wing talking point. Now let's listen again.
Close to us are literally killed or beaten by standing up for certain kinds of rights. And we see this with LGBTQ rights often, unfortunately. we need it not just for our psychological survival. We also need it because we
Okay, we're still arguing, so we're gonna rewind again. Milo, Milo, fuck off. You have been on this channel long enough to know better. You have heard me explain this probably no less than 24 times. I'm gonna slow way down. To queer Marxists, trans does not mean transition. Trans means transform or transcend, as in transform gender, transcend gender. When we are talking about trans people, we are defining trans as transition, as in transition from man to woman or woman to man. If you are transitioning from man to woman or woman to man, then you are upholding the gender binary. That is what trans means. That is how most trans people use the term trans. Non-binary people do not need to be trans. You do not need to be gay. You do not need to be anything to be non-binary except declare yourself to be non-binary. So queer Marxists are using non-binary bullshit to push their ideology, and because the conservative right, and apparently you, Milo, and I'm really disappointed by this because you've been on this channel a long time, don't understand the fucking definitions that I have painstakingly explained repeatedly every single day of my life for the last fucking year, or maybe not the last year on this one, but many months. It's still not getting through for some reason. I don't understand why. If you guys keep confusing normal trans people with queer Marxists because you cannot understand the difference between upholding the gender binary and abolishing the gender binary, you are going to lose. This is simple. Do you believe men and women exist, or do you not believe that men and women exist? That is quite literally the only effing thing that matters. That's it. Do you believe it exists, or do you not believe it exists? Most trans people, through virtue of the fact that they are transitioning from one gender to another, believe it exists. Is everyone clear? Does everyone understand? Do I need to explain this again? Cindy asks a perfectly reasonable question. Is it pretty safe to assume that anyone who identifies as non-binary is a socialist? No. I'm going to explain why. Because non-binary and gender ideology has now been pushed into schools starting in kindergarten. And the right, of course, has done nothing about this to stop it. So you have kids that have been learning this stuff for the better part of the last 10 years at a minimum. And so if someone has been told that this is true from the time they're 5, 6, 7 years old, and this is all they've ever learned from schools because people weren't paying attention to when gender ideology was in schools, they're going to think that non-binary is an actual thing, and that does not mean they are a socialist. However, there are an awful lot of non-binary socialists. An awful lot. And minimally, if someone has been groomed into this ideology, if they've been indoctrinated into this ideology and they just believe that's the way it is, they're useful idiots for them, and they need to be treated as though they are members of a cult. Because what's really happened is, well, conservatives were dicking around doing God knows what. Their children were being indoctrinated into a cult through gender ideology in schools and have never been taught anything differently. So you can't say that every non-binary person is a socialist, because there are an awful lot of kids that are identifying as queer and non-binary now because of what has happened in the schools. So you need to be careful. There needs to be nuanced takes, and I would treat them as though they have been indoctrinated into a cult, because that is explicitly what's happened. All right. Now we're going to go back and try to listen to this a third time, because I want to hear Judith Butler talk about how they are queering all of society. And I would strongly recommend that people listen to what's being said.
We have to be building political communities that prefigure the world we want to live in, that show people what world is possible, where you live together, you cohabit with radical differences, and without necessarily being radically threatened by one another. I mean, for those people who want the return to the ideal world where men are men and women are women, as Masha says, I mean, they may think that their stability and security resides there in the recapturing of such a world. But that world is always a fantasy, because that world was never safe for the rest of us, right? That world was producing massive suffering for the rest of us. That world was not a place of freedom for the rest of us. So it was.
When Judith Butler says that world was producing massive suffering for the rest of us, that world was not a world of freedom for the rest of us, what does she mean? The world in which the gender binary is upheld produces massive suffering for people who don't believe in the gender binary. It does not produce freedom for the rest of us. What does she mean? Tayton, that world equals capitalism. Capitalism. Exactly. The capitalist world, which reinforces the gender binary, which upholds the nuclear family, produced, quote unquote, massive suffering for everyone that doesn't want to believe in capitalism and doesn't want to engage in capitalism. These people literally think that their suffering is all a result of capitalism.
Always destabilized by its own repressive character, right? It was going to explode, or it was going to change, because people want to live in freedom and people want to live without fear.
That's right. I could not agree more. Another question that we're getting a lot in the chat here, and something that I'm personally looking to learn more about, especially now as I relocate to the Northeast at Hampshire College, what can gender studies departments, but not just them, the entire system of higher education, what can people in there start doing now to help combat what's going on, the fight against gender studies?
It's hard on Zoom, but I think Masha's looking at me to say, you take this one, Butler. Look, the first thing within academic universities is to make sure that faculty governance structures are in place, that the faculty are deciding the curriculum, not the board of trustees, not the governor of the state, right? They have no business intervening on questions of teaching and curricula, which are properly decided by faculty, whether that means unionizing as a faculty or shoring up faculty governance or shoring up principles of academic freedom, which include faculty governance. That is what has to happen. And that means taking advantage of every possible professional organization.
What Judith Butler is talking about is how they solidify their control over the universities. Because again, what has happened is the Frankfurt School came to Columbia University in the 1930s, and they set up shop there, and thus began the long march through the institutions, in which these people took over every single, well, not every single, but most colleges and universities in the country, and certainly all the influential ones, or the vast majority of the influential ones. And they got themselves into professorship positions. They got themselves into department lead positions. They got themselves into high-level academic positions where they can make decisions and advance an academic ideology that pushes socialism and crazy town far left bullshit onto the rest of us in society. From there, they took over the colleges of education, which trains all the teachers, and now the teacher education pool, all the people teaching in all the K through 12 schools, whether they be public, private, charter, wherever, have been indoctrinated into their far left critical theory bullshit in the colleges of education for at least 2 to 3 generations. What Judith Butler is talking about here is that Ron DeSantis has come in and has said, no, we're going to try doing something different at this socialist utopia that is the new college. And what we're going to try to do is install a classically liberal education. Well, the socialists in New College don't like that too much because it takes away all their power. The power that they had amassed years ago, took over the entire university with, became the training grounds for a whole crop of new generation of socialist activists, right? Because anyone who goes through colleges and universities has to go through the academic programs that these people set up. I was so lucky when I went to college. I went to Boston University under the John Silber years. I didn't have to do any of this stuff because John Silber was a conservative and he kept it all out. Every other college experience I had was online. So I didn't have to do any of this stuff. I didn't do traditional education. I am so lucky because every single student going to almost every university in the country today is being indoctrinated into far left ideology in all of their classes. All of them. And they don't know any differently. So Judith Butler is afraid that if more people get the idea that no, it doesn't have to be this way in colleges and universities, and they come in and they do what Ron DeSantis is, which is remove people from their positions, take their power away, that they are not going to be able to continue the indoctrination factory that it took them generations to set up. Right? So when Judith Butler is saying this all needs to rest in the faculty governance, faculty control, faculty governance, faculty control, what she means is we need to maintain all of our power. You're not taking it away from us. We worked too hard to get it. We need to maintain all of our power. That's what she's talking about.
That will help you make that case. It also means trying in the political field to stop interventions into faculty governance that have no place there.
Maintaining
Gender
power.
and women's studies programs have long been connected through professional organizations like the National Women's Studies Association. I know they're all over this. That's really important. It's also important to be part of international organizations that are fighting this same kind of thing in different places. I mean, when we're sitting in Florida, we're sitting in Wyoming, and we have a struggle. It seems like it's right there, and this is the struggle, and it's happening here. It's true, but there are many here's, and they're happening everywhere. You know, they happened in Budapest. They are happening.
This is exactly right, Milo. I'm glad you're back because I knew you were paying attention. We can all have brain farts every now and again, I suppose. Milo says, there is a communist revolution going on in America, and they have almost won without a single shot, and the right still does not realize that they're about to lose the U.S. Oh, not only does the right not realize how bad the situation is, the right has a mass of influencers telling them, you're winning, you're winning, you're winning, we're winning, it's all turning back, the pendulum is swinging, we're winning. Guys, the pendulum is never going to swing back. The pendulum's never going to swing back, and I'm going to explain why. There is a difference between political power and institutional power. Okay? Political power is when you get elected to a political position, an election that can be taken away from you in 2, 4, 6 years, depending on what position you got elected to, right? Political power is limited and it is extremely easy to lose. The right tries to gain power through political power, through winning of elections. So it is true that on the political power spectrum, the pendulum swings. No, 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 no. The pendulum may not have started. No, this is not true. This is not real. You're convincing yourself of something that is not real. You need to listen. Well, it is true that the pendulum swings in terms of political power. You'll have one party in power, and then people get pissed off with that party. They go with the other party. The left, exactly. The left didn't gain their power through political power. The left gained their power through institutional power. The left didn't get themselves put in positions where they could get themselves kicked out of in a single election. The left put themselves into academic positions that have tenure. That means they can never be fired from them. They put themselves in administrative positions that span whether or not a Democrat or Republican is in office. How long has Anthony Fauci been in office or held the office he did? He held that office during Republican administrations and Democratic administrations. That is true of most bureaucrats in government. The left gained power because they got themselves into positions that they could not be fired from, and they would not lose if they lost an election. That is why it doesn't actually matter if the pendulum swings one way or the other in terms of political power, because that is a short-term gain. It is not the long game. The left played the long game by gaining institutional power, and that is why they're winning, and it doesn't matter in 2024. I'll tell you right now, Republicans could win everything in 2024. They won't, but let's just play in the realm of fantasy for a second. Say Republicans won the House, won the Senate, won the presidency in 2024. Everyone's high-fiving. Doesn't make a difference. Because political power is much weaker than institutional power. And even if Republicans win everything, they still don't own the universities. They still don't own the media. They still don't own entertainment. They still don't own the administrative state. Why do you think it was so hard for Trump to drain the swamp? Why didn't Trump drain the swamp? Because he can't. Because it's the administrative state. The left owns the administrative state. So elections don't matter. The pendulum doesn't matter. The pendulum ain't swinging. The pendulum done swung. It's sitting there now. Ain't going nowhere. Oh, Adrian, they're not just doing test runs to abolish parental rights. They're actively abolishing parental rights. These are not test runs. They are actively abolishing parental rights. This is correct, Prometheus. The right wants culture war without participating in culture because they take their toys and go home. That's exactly right. Oh, William, it's longer than that. It's over a century in the making. It's over a century in the making. Tayton, thank you for the super chat. Gulag Archipelago is a great example of how all this works. The masses don't realize until it's already complete. And it might be already complete, guys. And I'm not joking about that. I'm not just being dramatic. I actually do believe that. I believe we are inextricably effed. So we might as well get a preview of what's coming, huh?
Happening in Uganda, they're happening in many places in the world. In the UK, where the trans-exclusionary feminists are attacking gender studies and even the concept of gender. They sound like right-wing pundits. It's a frightening prospect. So we need to make the strongest alliances we can, and to pool our resources and to decide our strategies within such organizations and networks.
Awesome. Thank you, Professor Butler. And we received another question from one Stephen Tremaine in the chat, asking me what I want administrations and institutions to do. Thank you, one, for wanting to ask me a question. I'm just a little guy, but that's what I want. That's what I want to see. We have another great question coming from Nick Clarkson, and this is a pretty long one, so I'm going to read it as it's been written. Are there commonalities in the rhetorical landscape across authoritarianisms? I'm thinking about Chris Rufo's intentional misuse of key terms. For example, it's been really disorienting to be the target of so much misinformation from trustees, politicians, etc., from one side, and the limits of what can be said in a quote in the paper on the other. It's been difficult to figure out who I'm speaking to when I speak out. Is this common to authoritarianisms?
Yeah, Chris Rufo's an authoritarian. Jesus Christ.
So put a little...
That's like the silliest... Chris Rufo's not an authoritarian. Jesus Christ. That's all I'm going to say. Stephen B., thanks for the honesty, no matter how hard to swallow. I mean, I wish I weren't right, man, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. This is the God's honest truth. I would love for someone to prove me wrong. I would love for someone to prove me wrong. If anyone can prove me wrong, they're more than welcome to give it a try. Thank you for the super chat, Stephen. Appreciate it.
Sure. Is it normal for them to completely dismantle the truth?
Yes, I'd say that's pretty normal, and it's certainly normal for totalitarianisms. A totalitarian leader has to own the truth, has to own reality.
We are seeing the ironclad law of woke projection in action right now, but from well, I won't blame Libby, because I don't think Libby said much of anything, but Judith and Masha have certainly been very liberal in the truth in the course of this presentation. Rottweiler, thank you for the super chat. The cons seem to believe things are going back to how they were in the 50s, thinking Gen Z is conservative, talk about being... Yo. I said this on the last stream in that rant I did at the end, but like, listen, if you guys think that Gen Z is conservative, that is one of the stupidest things I've ever heard in my life. Gen Z was on the track to be conservative. That's true. That actually was real. And then they went through the public school system. The public school system trained them to be activists. It trained them to be woke activists. And so, and we're just starting to see Gen Z in the real world. They're just graduating into it. Like, I mean, what are they? What are Gen Z? Like 26, 27, something like that? They're just getting into the real world. You want to know when the real, like people in the chat were saying earlier, like that we're already basically a socialist country. Oh, no. You give it 10 years. You think that what we're dealing with is painful now? Yo, you give that 10 years when all of Gen Z or most of Gen Z is in the working world and they're already starting in on the next generation, indoctrinating them through the schools because conservatives have spent so much time banning their book of the day that they totally missed that they didn't actually fix the schools in the first place. And so the schools just keep indoctrinating kids and making it worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And conservatives are high-fiving because they finally got genderqueer like unpublished everywhere. You wait 10 years, we are really going to start experiencing some pain then. That's going to be like next effing level. And ain't no one doing anything about it. So no, you're right, Rottweiler. Gen Z is not conservative. There may have been a time when that was the direction that they're going, and there are books saying that that was the direction that they were going. Thank you, Strauss and Howe. But they didn't end up that way because of the intervention of the public schools. Oh, is Libby the one who spit on Chris Rufo? Libby is the so here's what happened. So Libby apparently at a protest spit on Chris Rufo's shoe, and then Chris Rufo filed assault charges against Libby, and that was why Libby had to leave New College and go to Hampshire. Is this? I didn't realize this was the person that spit on his shoe. That's funny.
In order to build a totalitarian regime. But there's something that I've been sort of flashing back to as we've had this entire conversation. In 2016, I went to cover a meeting of the World Congress of Families, which is an international organization that purports to defend the traditional family, and that has been behind a lot of absolutely horrible legislation in different parts of the world. And part of my interest in covering that Congress, which happened in Tbilisi, Georgia that year, was that I had heard different theories of how this international network of right-wing lobbyists and activists function. And one of the theories was that it was a bunch of US evangelicals who no longer had a foothold at home, who started exporting their values and their ideas. And the other one was the exact opposite. It was that it was a bunch of Russians with money and ideas who wanted to create and shore up international networks of extreme conservatism. And what I actually saw was a genuine meeting of the minds. There were people from all over the world who many of them felt pretty lonely where they were at that time. And they got a hearing in Tbilisi from people who thought like them. It also felt lonely like them. And
hang on, Iris is living in fantasy land, and we need to give Iris a reality check. Iris says, I believe they will eventually implode in their own misery, but it may take a long time, 10 years or more, sadly. We must hold face and survive this. Iris, this is not going to happen. This is not realistic. This is not hinged into reality. This is not how it works. This is not real. Whoever told you this lied to you. While it is true that these people do generally have slightly higher propensity for mental health issues than normal, they're not mentally ill. This is another lie that conservative influencers have told their audience. These people are not mentally ill. They're not mentally insane. Most of them are not depressed. They may be angry, but that's not the same thing as depression. And they are not going to fall under the weight of their own misery because, again, how they have gained power is institutional power. A couple people experiencing clinical depression does not take away a century of gaining institutional power. This is not a realistic view of the world, and this is a view of the world that will lead to you losing. This is like how conservatives are just like, just pray. Just pray. Jesus will save us. Just pray to God that Jesus will save us and keep faith that Jesus will save us. Jesus ain't saving you guys. Not happening. Nope. Not happening.
also felt victimized like them, right? I mean, victimhood is a huge part, as we've already mentioned, of this whole rhetoric. But the reason I mention it is that a lot of the time, this idea of similarities among different autocracies takes us down the path of trying to find the source of the thing, right? The source of evil, and gets us into a conspiracy thinking loop, and that's really not useful, right? I think it's super useful to see this.
I want to celebrate something because I've yelled at Kyle in the last few streams, and Kyle, we agree. Listen, I don't want to diminish like that there were victories and there were like small victories and successes in the Million March in Canada, but Canada is already lost. Canada's gone. Canada's socialist. Ain't coming back. Not going to happen. And so, while I don't want to discourage people from participating in stuff like this because I do think it's important, I also don't think that if you think that one single protest over a weekend is going to change everything, what happened to the trucker strike? Where is the impact from the trucker strike? Are we still seeing the massive victory of the trucker strike? Because that went on for how long? That went on for weeks before they started shutting down people's bank accounts and they really cracked down and they ended up winning. The socialist government in Canada won against the trucker strike, guys, and that went on for a lot longer than the Million March for Kids, okay? And then there was some sort of trucker thing in the United States that never did anything, but it was on Fox News, and so people felt good about it, high-fived, but it never actually did anything. I think many of the people who are focused on books and they don't realize that queer theory and Marxism is what they should be highlighting. Yeah, well. Oh, well, yeah. So congratulations. The trucker strike in which the Canadian government abolished the truckers. It showed their authoritarianism. Okay, great. Did anything happen from that? What changed as a result of that? So we knew the Canadian government was authoritarian. Congratulations, we already knew that. That wasn't new information. What happened as a result? Yes, the Canadian trucker strike, which apparently everyone has already forgotten about. It was so impactful and so successful that everyone's already forgotten about it, was when they were shutting down people's bank accounts. They won. They won, and it wasn't even hard for them to win. So I'm sorry, Canada. I really am. If it's any consolation, I think the US is pretty F too.
Similarities so that we can create solidarity networks, so that we can learn from one another, so that we can look ahead to what's coming next and try to protect ourselves against that, or better yet, be proactive. But it's not useful in trying to find the source of evil, because that's actually not how it works.
Awesome. Thank you, Professor. It's going to be a little bit of a 180. We've got some questions regarding brain drain in Florida. You know, Professor Gesson, I'm sure you've observed this happening in the places you've studied. Professor
Texas is not going to be safe. Texas is going to turn blue at some point in the not too distant future. And there are very few states that are safe from this. It's going to be everywhere.
Professor Butler, I'm sure you've studied this as well. Do you see a brain drain happening and continuing in states like Florida, where these attacks on academic freedom are occurring?
You know, it's funny, I might have a little problem with the idea of brain drain, because if you're saying that people are fleeing the state or seeking jobs or residency outside of the state because they can't live in a homophobic, transphobic, and racist environment that's being intensified by the state administration, then we have a different problem. It's not that, oh, Florida doesn't have intelligent people in it. It's rather that people who are thinking critically, or even historically or politically in grounded ways about gender, race, migration, and who are committed to principles of equality, freedom, and justice, that they feel that that's no longer a habitable environment for them, or that they can't keep their job, or they've been released from their job against their will. Then we're talking about a political situation where the state is actually pushing people out who represent certain kinds of values. It's not just that intelligence is gone. I mean, maybe yes, it is, but we are we're talking about censorship and firing people and contesting rights of parenting and contesting employment and contesting academic freedom. I mean, maybe some people think they should fight and stay, but if you're not safe, if you're not paid, if you no longer have a place to live and you're not safe in your environment or your community, you don't know who to trust anymore. It's really hard to live there. So that's the problem, is that some portion of that state and state government are pushing progressives out in an effort to make Florida a conservative state. And of course, that should be, that should give rise to a massive rebellion, one that has to be sustained over time. Right.
Judith Butler just called for mass rebellion in Florida. And when these people say mass rebellion, what they mean is through extra legal means. They don't care if they're doing it legally or not. And we heard Jesse Hagopian, who is a Black Lives Matter in school teacher, a Zen Education Project guy, hardcore socialist out of Seattle, the one who said he was working with teachers in Florida to overtly break the anti-woke laws. Jesse Hagopian was like, just wait till they arrest a teacher. We're all going down to Florida. Mark my words, Florida in 2024, if not sooner, Florida is going to be the site of some sort of mass demonstration on the part of the left, and it's probably going to center around a teacher getting arrested for a stupid book that isn't even actually really that bad, but the government wants to like make an example of them to prove how anti-woke he is before the election or something like that. And some sort of teacher is going to get arrested, and I promise you guys, they're already planning on flying in. The far left is already planning for this. They're already talking about it, like getting people to Florida for mass demonstrations, which Judith Butler just alluded to in this talk. And there's going to be some sort of like incident in Florida. I still think there's going to be some sort of trans Floyd incident like James Lindsay's been predicting, in terms of like someone is going to murder a drag queen or a trans person. And if it's not a conservative that does something stupid, which let's not kid ourselves, that's not out of the realm of possibility, it's going to be like a false flag sort of thing. I think it's going to be in Florida. Watch out.
Right. So we need to learn from other kinds of political struggles, like how do you sustain a rebellion so that it can become even more powerful than rebellion? It can become revolt, or it can really materialize as radical social change and even the dissolution of that regime, which is going to happen. So even if you move out, you still have to have a stake in what's happening there.
That's going to be their battleground. Yup, and
So
Rottweiler,
shifted the
hang on, Rottweiler is making his great point that he always makes. Your real action is your target's reaction. Guys, you always have to remember, the left is doing everything to get you to react. They are begging the right to react, and the right is taking the bait over and over and over and over and over again. But they're going to try to stage something in Florida where they are explicitly going to provoke someone on the right to try to get them to react. The reaction is the goal. And they're going to use that to light off another summer of love. Maybe sooner. We'll see, I guess.
topic, but it felt like I kind of needed to. Sorry about that.
No, I think that was perfect. And it leads me right into another question that my friends from New College, Sophia Brown and Dennis Nazarova, have been asking. How exactly do we combat what Sophia's been calling a chilling effect that anti-gender legislation and rhetoric has had on college campuses. How do we talk about gender and sexuality in places where we are now prosecuted by the government for doing so? How do we defy the labels being put upon us? How do we get past all of this?
I would argue for taking that question and similar questions very literally. Like, one of the reasons that I think it's actually useful to compare different authoritarianisms is that they help us see what's still possible, right? If you look at a place like Russia, where LGBT people no longer have access to any legally distributed media, where people who would call the war in Ukraine a war no longer have access to any legally distributed media. In fact, where you can go to prison for calling the war a war, even in a private conversation, right? Maybe that helps. And I'm not going to say that anybody who's living in Florida is lucky or count your blessings or anything like that. But pragmatically, it helps you see how much is still possible, how many different areas have not been shut down, right? Look for those, right? I can't sitting at this moment in Woodstock, New York, I can't tell you exactly what's possible in Florida, but I can tell you for sure that a lot is still possible. There are a lot of avenues for speech. There's a lot of media access. There are a lot of possibilities for protest. There's a lot of possibilities for study. And I think that sort of setting out to identify those possibilities and taking advantage of them, of staking them out, in part to protect those spaces, but in part just to use them while they're still available, is really important.
Awesome. Thank you so much for those answers. Those were both, I think, addressing exactly what we were looking for here. So this is returning to the specific New College situation and gender studies as it exists in higher education. So some current members of the New College Board of Trustees have said that activism does not have a place in higher education, and then use that as an excuse to begin dismantling New College's gender studies program, as our friend Emma Nattle has written in the Q&A. So what are your thoughts on this use of there's no activism to do conservative activism in higher education?
Well, dismantling gender studies programs or dismantling programs that teach about Black history or the history of race in the United States or elsewhere, that dismantling is activist. That's conservative activism.
I just want to point out that every single time these people talk about the teaching of race, the teaching of true history, they don't actually mean true history. They don't mean accurate history. What they mean is far left radical history. And the reason that they truly believe that the board of directors at New College doesn't have the ability to get rid of academic programs, which, by the way, colleges and universities add academic programs all the time. Colleges and universities get rid of academic programs all the time. It's usually an enrollment decision, but they can do it for other reasons too if they want to go in a different direction. Like, it's really not that big of a deal. But Judith Butler wants you to think that this is like a violation of religious sacrament because they're getting rid of programs that Judith Butler likes, because she believes that the only way to teach real history, to teach accurate history, to teach real things that people need to know is to teach a far left radical version of whatever it is.
So they can say that we're doing activism, but they are doing activism through censorship and dismantling. And as you say, through, in some cases.
Well, both sides are doing activism. It's just a matter of like which side is going to win. In this case at New College, I actually think that Rufo and company might win because it's a numbers game. They brought in like 300 new students into a campus of like, 600 students, 600, 700 students, something like that. So next year, they're going to have a completely new student population that is not like built on socialism. And so I actually think at New College specifically, they're going to win because it's a numbers game. So Judith Butler is actually correct here in that it's all activism, but this is the world that people like Judith Butler have created because they were the ones that made the world into a constant struggle for power. Well, at some point, the people that you're exerting power over, Judith, with your godmother of queer theory bullshit, those people are going to get pissed off and they're going to start fighting back. Now they're doing it way too late. I think it's too little too late. I mean, I'm not trying to be a pessimist or black pill or anything. I think it's way too little too late. But since we're on this ride into socialism anyway, we may as well enjoy our wins where we can.
Setting up situations where you can be prosecuted for even speaking about certain issues or insisting on teaching certain issues. So we shouldn't think that activism is out of this picture. In fact, it's an unjustifiable activist intervention into academic freedom. That is what we are seeing. So every time they say that, it is really important to relocate where the activism is. On the other hand, I do want to say that in gender studies classes, in classes on race and slavery, none of us are saying, you must take this position, you must now work for this organization, you must, to pass this class, you must have a single political point of view. No, we don't teach like that. Teaching is about opening up complex issues and hearing various people's points of view, asking them to give evidence for the points of views that they defend, getting unsettled by points of view that you don't agree with. That is the open inquiry that characterizes work in the university. It is not the same as taking a political stand or joining a political organization. Now, it may be that people who study gender studies come from political organizations or go out to them, but there's no single pipeline and there's no mandate. So the idea that we are simply ideological, that we're teaching political positions or we're mandating them or we're grooming them or we're indoctrinating them, that's a mistaken understanding of what we actually do. There's also a refusal to read. There's an anti-intellectualism on the attack on gender studies.
That's
and
true.
What they call critical race theory. And let's remember that Christopher Rufo is behind the national attack on critical race theory
Yes,
in the
he
United
is.
States. And that the same person who's attacking critical race theory has been galvanizing the anti-gender ideology movement in Florida as well.
Yep.
So, and on that topic, we could say, oh, what is it they oppose in critical race theory? Well, the fact is they don't even know what critical race theory is.
Oh, really, Judith? Oh, really? We don't know what critical race theory is? Guys, put out your best definition of critical race theory in the chat. I will give my definition, which is critical race theory is an ideology that started in academia in the 70s that says racism exists everywhere in every person and everything and every interaction. And the job of the critical theorist is to explore how, not if, how racism occurs in every single circumstance, because one of the guardian tenets of critical race theory is that racism is always assumed to have occurred. Why is that? And I'm expanding on my definition now. Why is racism always assumed to have occurred? Because the United States is a systemically racist country that was built on racism when white men brought black slaves to the United States in 1776, even though it wasn't even in the that wasn't even the right date. Like, slaves have been here since the 1500s in Florida. But, Nicole Hannah-Jones at the New York Times doesn't seem to know that. So she says that whiteness started when white people brought black slaves to the United States, and white people weren't even considered white before that. They were considered to be French or English or German or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They were identifying as ethnicities, but white people were created when slavery came to America, because they had to distinguish black from white so that they could keep the black people oppressed, and the white people built up institutions of power to uphold and uplift other white people, which is code for capitalism, by the way, because slavery is grounded in capitalism. This is why the police are grounded in capitalism, because the police started, these people say, when they were catching runaway slaves and things like that. Anyway, white people built up all these systems of power based in capitalism to keep black people down. That is the basis for systemic racism in this country, and is why today whiteness and capitalism are interchangeable, because it's not about your skin color. These people will call anyone who is white, or anyone who engages in capitalism, the bourgeois, who believes in private property, who believes in individuality, who believes in meritocracy. They will call all these people white. Larry Elder is a great example of that, with the Los Angeles Times calling him the black face of white supremacy when he is very, 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 very black. Byron Donalds got called exactly the same thing, also very, 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 very black. So you don't have to be white skinned to engage in whiteness, because whiteness doesn't mean your skin color. Whiteness means that you're engaging in capitalism. You are part of the bourgeois, not part of the proletariat. And that is our expanded definition of critical race theory in so many words. I don't know what critical race theory is, Judith. All right. Sure. Nick says that critical race theory teaches that it's the job of CRT activists to assume racism at all times. It's their job to find out why, not how, but why racism occurred. Exactly. To paraphrase a certain media personality, CRT means that everything is racist and all you have to do is point it out. Exactly. James Lindsay says that critical race theory is the belief that racism is the fundamental organizing principle of society. None of us know what it means, Judith. All right. Sure.
They assume it means that white people are bad, or that slavery pervades U.S. history. Well, it is true. Slavery has been there since the discovery of the Americas.
What did I say?
Colonial intervention. Slavery was there. There's no question about it. But the ways in which this characterization takes place, it seems so inflammatory.
Judith, do you even know what critical race theory is, Judith? Because I'm pretty sure I just gave a more advanced definition of critical race theory than you did. And I'm not even an academic, Judith. I've never even studied your literature. I picked all this up from watching like thousands of hours of your trainings. Do you even know what critical race theory is, Judith? Because I'm pretty sure I've given more of a definition to it than you have.
Nobody even stops to think, what is critical race theory? Is it a legal doctrine?
What is
How
it?
did it originate? For what
purposes
in the law?
I just told
How is
you.
it different from Black history?
What is
What
it,
are the
Judith?
various
Can you
points of
define
view
it?
within
Or are you just
law and
asking
outside
questions
of
to make
law
yourself
on
sound
Black
smart?
studies
What is it?
in which we could situate critical race theory? Do we need to do some reading in order to make some grounded judgments? But this is not that kind of argument. This is an argument against reading. No books of that kind, no reading of that kind, which means
I'm fairly certain that I've done more reading on this topic than Judith Butler, based on her complete lack of definition for critical race theory, Judith.
that what are circulating are not judgments based in any kind of documentation, but forms of censorship and persecution that are deeply anti-intellectual and that want to shut down our minds and yours.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Professor Butler. So that was a good set of questions. I want to say thank you to everybody who submitted their questions. I wish we could get to all of them because I love all of you individually. A shout out to David Schiller. I appreciate your interest in my specific situation. There was concern expressed over, I've had a crazy thing happen to me, the whole almost getting arrested thing and, getting forced out of the state of Florida. There are risks being faced currently by students in New College, Florida, who are continuing to do student activism. We've had now 3, including myself, students forced to transfer out of New College. So this is absolutely a climate that is dangerous and oppressive. So we're gonna unfortunately start to wrap it up as we've got about 2 minutes left in the hour. I want to thank so much Open Society University Network, Penn America, and Bard College, who have put forth the resources to get all this done and to hunt down these awesome professors to speak to us. Please remember that the next lecture for Alt New College will be happening at 12:15 tomorrow. That's noon 15, not midnight 15. It's going to be on young people and how they can change America via youth voting and political power. I'd like to point you all to the Alt New College website. It's going to be alt, A-L-T, New College, spelled as you would hope, .org. So that is where you can go to get more details on this continuing awesome set of lectures that we're going to be doing via Alt New College. Otherwise, if you're interested in supporting New College as a whole, please reach out to our alumni organizations that have been working to help students like me. We have the Novo Collegiate Alliance, which has done amazing work to support me throughout all of the drama that Chris Rufo has put me through. If you're interested in helping,
a lesson in the real
via
world
donations, there is the novocollegian.org/critical-needs.
Don't spit on someone's shoe next time.
Towards student activism. But thank you all so much for attending. This has been an amazing inaugural lecture for Alt New College. Long live gender studies, long live queerness.
Well, that was something, wasn't it? That was something, wasn't it? We absolutely need to infiltrate this Alt New College thing and start streaming all their shit live. I'm not even joking about that. Can we please do that? Because we need to do that. Obviously, we need to do that. I don't know how we're going to do that. Can we just sign up on their website? Is that it? Can I just sign up? Or do I actually need like a new college thing? You know, I might know someone who might be able to hook me up with new college credentials if I need them in order to access this. I might know a couple of people who can hook me up with that. Anyway, we'll have to look into that later, guys. That is all I have for right now. Again, this is a 3-stream day, so now we have finished my second stream. I got some yelling out of my system. I'm feeling a little bit better. Yelled at some people, done a couple rants. Feel like I did some really good rants today. Gonna clip those later. But for right now, I'm gonna go take a break. And we are going to be back at 9:30 tonight for Nothing Remotely Controversial with Joshua. So if you want to get some news and psychics and have some fun and let our hair down and have a lighthearted look at the news, and don't come if you're going to complain about tarot cards, okay? But we will be doing Nothing Remotely Controversial in just under 2 hours. And so I'm going to be back for that. And as a reminder, tomorrow we are not only doing our 5 p.m. stream, but we are also streaming the GOP clown car debate tomorrow night. Joshua will be joining for that as well. And also as a reminder, on Thursday, I'm doing another supporter exclusive spy stream. This has nothing to do with librarians. We're doing something around transing and alt-right fascists and stuff like that. That's really all I can say. More information is available on the Substack for that, but in order to be eligible to go to that, you need to be a supporter of my work. You can sign up on the Substack for $8 a month or $80 a year. You can join my locals community. You can join my Patreon. You can become a subscriber on my Twitter. You can become a member of this here YouTube channel, and all of those will get you access to the supporter exclusive spy stream on Thursday. It's not going to be all day. It's more truncated. You can find information on the Substack today so you can know if you want to sign up for it or not. I'm going to go take a little break, guys. Thank you for dealing with my yelling and generally pissy attitude today. I really do appreciate it. Although I feel like I was correct in everything that I said, I was definitely a little bit pissy, and so I appreciate you guys putting up with me. I will see you guys in a couple hours. Take care. We'll see you soon. Bye.